The Sewol-ho ferry sinking 5 years on. South Korea marks the day by holding memorial ceremonies across the country, vowing to prevent such a tragedy from happening again.
President Moon Jae-in embarks on a three-nation tour in Central Asia. High on the agenda will be shoring up economic ties and winning support for his push for a nuke-free Korean peninsula.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo expresses hope for sanctions to be lifted from North Korea, but only after its complete denuclearization.
A major fire ravages the famed Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, collapsing the medieval building's iconic spire. Messages of consolations pour in, including from President Moon Jae-in.
K-pop phenomenon BTS goes into the record books once again, reaching #1 on the Billboard 200 for the third time. The boy band also looks set to top the UK officials chart. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Arirang News Center, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Noaram.
And I'm Han-daeun. Thanks for joining us. Exactly 5 years ago today, the tragic news of the Sewol-ho ferry sinking left the entire nation in utter shock and deep sorrow.
To mark one of the darkest incidents in Korea's modern history, various events were held across the country to remember the 304 victims who lost their lives. Our Kim Mo-kyun was at one of the largest memorial ceremonies and files this report.
People were silent as a siren blared out for a minute, marking the beginning of the memorial service for the 304 victims who lost their lives on this day 5 years ago. Today's memorial event is taking place at Hwarang Public Garden in Ansan, near Hanwha High School, where 261 of the victims were from. Some 5,000 people, including the bereaved families and government officials, took part in the event. The nation's education minister expressed her condolences and said that she feels a grave sense of responsibility.
Even though 5 years have passed, the exact cause of the tragedy still hasn't been revealed. The Moon Jae-in administration will reveal the truth at all costs and create a safer country that citizens can trust.
Musical instruments were played and a choir sang as part of the commemorative performances. The audience was moved to tears when one student survivor of the tragedy recited her letter to the victims.
Dear friends, I feel that my longing for you is similar to guilt. What has separated us? The fact that you are not here to hear how sorry I am is so painful. But I will try to grow as a competent person so that you guys will be proud of me when we meet again.
One representative of family members of the victims said that relatives are still suffering from traumatic memories, demanding stern punishment for those responsible.
Our innocent children lost their lives, but those responsible still haven't been punished. The state and those who had power back then neglected their duty. We also need to bring our children back in Ansan and create a 416 life and security park so that the country would be reminded not to repeat the same mistake ever again.
Spring has become a reminder of the Sewol-ho incident for many South Korean citizens. Carrying yellow ribbons, a symbol to honor the memory of the victims and their families, participants vowed not to forget the lives lost. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News, Ansan.
Pengmok Port in Jeollanam-do Province is the closest port to where the ill-fated Sewol-ho ferry had drowned, taking away with it more than 300 lives, most of whom were high school students. Hundreds of Koreans visited the port today to remember the victims. And let's now connect with Arirang's Won Jung-hwan, who is in Pengmok Port for us tonight. Jung-hwan, give us details.
Hi, Dan. I'm now at the Pengmok port, where the bodies of the victims first arrived to be handed to their families and friends. More than 300 people died when the Sewol-ho ferry sank in the waters off Jindo exactly 5 years ago of today. And to remember those who died, Pengmok Port, which is the closest port to the site of the disaster, still sees a stream of visitors who travel a long way to pay respects to the victims. There's been a lot of tears and heartbreak as the visitors recall the incident. And I got a chance to hear from some of the people who are here for the victims who died 5 years ago.
We are now in our second year of high school, and most of the victims from the incident that happened 5 years ago were the same age as us. I feel really sorry for their loss, as they would have had hopes and dreams like us.
Every time I come here, I say to myself that this kind of thing should never happen again. As an adult, looking at those kids who passed away so young, I feel responsibility.
Cho-won, you're there with the families and friends of the victims. In what ways are they expressing their loss today?
The pain for the families and friends of the victims is likely to continue much longer than we can possibly imagine. Near at the port, there is a container facility which is set up to be used for the Paengmok Memorial Center, a makeshift venue to commemorate the victims. At the center, group photos of the young victims with big smiles on their faces are hung, instead of the usual portraits used for mourning. The families and friends of the victims often drop by at this place to check out their loved ones and leave their belongings inside the container as well. And I had a chance to hear from the father of Cho Chan-min, one of the students who died in the disaster.
Nothing is revealed yet. Well, the only thing that what we want to know is why our children had to die from that incident. That's it. But nothing has been revealed yet.
Indeed, many still feel core questions surrounding the disaster remain unanswered. What caused the sinking, and why didn't the government initiate the rescue mission immediately? But some say the collective mourning and reflection on the disaster has changed Korean society. The recent successful tackling of the wildfire in Gosong and Sokcho is representative of such changes. Indeed, some could say the Sewol-ho ferry sinking has left a legacy that citizens' lives and safety should come above anything else. That's all for me from Paengmok Port, and back to you, Dawn.
Our Won Jung-won for us tonight. Thank you. Soon after the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, the South Korean government introduced various measures to prevent similar tragedies. 5 years have passed, and Korea is now approaching disasters and crises differently. Our Lee Min-sun tells us more.
Today is the 5th anniversary of the Sewol-ho ferry sinking, and is also the 5th National Safety Day. The day was created right after the disaster to learn lessons from it and make Korea a safer country. Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun said at the National Safety Day event on Tuesday that the government had improved national safety inspections and integrated safety information systems. The central government is also in the process of unifying networks for disaster response, as it was pointed out that the separate communication lines that disaster agencies had during the 2014 ferry sinking hindered rescue efforts. A total of 333 agencies in 8 fields, including the police, firefighters, local governments, and the military, will be on the same line when the work is completed in 2025.
The biggest change since the Sewol-ho ferry accident is the public's perspective on safety and how the president reacts to a national crisis. Central and local governments are also systematically working together in terms of safety and crisis management.
At the school level, students must now take safety classes, and elementary school students must take surviving swimming classes. Soon after the ferry sinking, schools were advised to go in smaller groups for field trips, and a safety instructor was required to be present. And these measures are recently proving their effectiveness.
One such example is the recent Sokcho fire. A group of students were on a field trip, but they said they were able to evacuate safely without panicking because they previously had training.
However, the experts still think there's much to be done, such as strengthening the penalties for violating safety regulations, since people still tend to neglect safety regulations if the penalty is not severe enough. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Turning to some other news now, and US President Donald Trump has maintained an upbeat tone on denuclearization talks with North Korea, saying the issue is, quote, moving forward. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, meanwhile, has expressed hope of Pyongyang's denuclearization by the end of the year. Kan Young-woo reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump says talk is okay with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, adding he does not need the process to move too quickly. During a speech in Minnesota on Monday local time, President Trump reiterated that North Korea's denuclearization is moving along and his relationship with Kim is very good. He said talks with Pyongyang are moving along perfectly and there's a lot of constructive things going on without elaborating on the details. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, meanwhile, says he prays for the day sanctions are lifted from North Korea after complete and verifiable denuclearization is achieved. Speaking to reporters in Texas on Monday, Pompeo stressed, however, that sanctions will remain in place until Pyongyang dismantles its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. In regards to Kim Jong-un's statement last week about his willingness to have a third summit with Trump if the U.S. comes with the right attitude and appropriate method, Pompeo said he appreciates Kim's comments, adding that he would love to see North Korea's denuclearization before the end of the year. Reiterating that Kim Jong-un has made a commitment to denuclearize, the U.S. Secretary of State pointed out that his teams are working with North Koreans to come up with a path forward so they can reach their ultimate goal, the denuclearization of Pyongyang. Progress toward denuclearization has seemingly come to a halt after Kim and Trump failed to reach an agreement at their second summit in Hanoi in February. Kang-young-woo, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has embarked on an 8-day trip to Central Asia, where he will be visiting 3 countries. His focus will be on shoring up economic ties with them and winning their backing for his efforts to denuclearize North Korea. Shin Se-min reports.
President Moon Jae-in will be on the road for more than a week visiting Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. He hopes to improve relations on the economic and political fronts while earning support for his administration's peace drive on the Korean peninsula.
The 3 Central Asian nations the president will tour are some of the major partners of the administration's New Northern Policy drive.
For 3 days from Tuesday, the president will be in Turkmenistan's capital, Ashgabat, where he will sit down with President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov for talks on strengthening strategic partnerships, including making it easier for South Korean firms to make inroads into the country. He will also tour a $3 billion petrochemical plant site in Kyanli that was built by a global consortium led by Korea's Hyundai engineering company. President Moon continues on to Uzbekistan on Thursday for a 4-day stay. The South Korean leader will hold a summit with the president there and address parliamentarians in a bid to improve bilateral ties in fields such as the medical and tech industries. The last stop of President Moon's 3-nation trip ends in Kazakhstan. The South Korean leader will hold a summit with his newly inaugurated counterpart, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, as well as the country's first president, Nursultan Nazarbayev. They're expected to talk about the so-called Kazakh model of denuclearization, something that allowed the country to accumulate wealth in return for ditching its nuclear weapons. It's also a model U.S. President Donald Trump pitched to North Korea for its own denuclearization. President Moon will also attend a repatriation ceremony for the remains of the 2 Korean independence fighters who were buried in Kazakhstan. He will also push to bring home the remains of General Hong Bum-do, a fighter who stood against Japan's colonial rule of Korea in the early 1900s. On his first trip to the region, the president hopes to help strengthen friendly relationships with the 3 countries and lay the groundwork for future partnerships under the New Northern Policy Initiative. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now let's turn over to Europe now. Messages of consolation as well as donations are pouring in from around the world after a massive fire engulfed the historic Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Among those to offer their sympathies was President Moon Jae-in. Our Lee Ji-won has more.
As the news of the fire at Notre Dame spread across the globe, world leaders showed their support for France, including South Korean President Moon Jae-in. In a tweet on Tuesday, President Moon said the damage to the more than 850-year-old cathedral is a loss to everyone. He called the landmark one of history's most important treasures and said the world will work together to restore it. He added that the fire will not break the French spirit of freedom, equality, and philanthropy, and expressed support for President Macron. U.S. President Donald Trump was also quick to tweet on fire, saying how horrible it was to watch. After the fire was put out, Trump tweeted, "God bless the people of France." Donations are pouring in from around the world as fundraising campaigns launch for Notre Dame's restoration. The family of Bernard Arnault and his luxury goods group LVMH will donate $226 million. The head of the Kering luxury goods company, François-Henri Pinault, said his firm will donate $113 million. Kering owns Gucci and other brands. French President Emmanuel Macron described the fire as a terrible tragedy and vowed to launch an international campaign to raise funds for the restoration starting from Tuesday. The fire is understood to have begun before 7 p.m. local time on Monday, burning a large part of the roof and causing the cathedral's iconic spire to collapse before it was put out after 8 hours.
It's a history that is coming to an end of a global heritage architecture. It's incredibly unfortunate. This is something that will have the world mourning.
It's 1,000 years of history. It's France, the national symbol of France that has been damaged. It's a powerful symbol for us Christians. It's Holy Week. We are coming up to Easter. It's a strong symbol. We are completely destitute.
Police are saying the fire probably began accidentally and could be linked to restoration work that was underway. The exact cause is still unknown, but the Paris prosecutor's office has opened an investigation. 이지원, Arirang News.
One of Korea's biggest conglomerates, Kumho Asiana, is going through a cash crunch and has decided to sell off its flagship unit, Asiana Airlines. Several names have come up as potential bidders. We won't know who's taking over for a while, but our Kim Da-mi takes a look at what these companies are bringing to the table.
Several South Korean conglomerates have been mentioned as potential buyers of Asiana Airlines, mainly based on their financial stability and the ability to afford the airline's $880 million price tag. Among those mentioned is SK Group, the nation's third largest conglomerate. The telecommunications and chips giant has denied all rumors of being interested in taking over Asiana Airlines, and SK chairman Choi Tae-won gave no comment when asked by reporters. However, market analysts note the group's sizable capital resources, including SK Hynix, and a fundamental growth strategy as the main reasons for the group's possible interest. The acquisition would also make SK the second largest conglomerate by assets, which is another tempting reason for SK Group. Hanwha is another potential bidder, considering the group owns an aircraft engine manufacturing unit. Aegyong, the owner of South Korea's Jeju Air, may also be interested, as Asiana Airlines may be a good addition to further expand into the aviation sector. For Shinsegae, purchasing the airline may help the conglomerate grow its duty-free business. While other conglomerates, including CJ Group, are denying any interest, experts say the denials could just be a business strategy to prevent the sale price from soaring.
Interested corporations have already calculated if taking over the company is beneficial to them. They are remaining silent so that they can work on getting a deal in their favor.
The chairman of the State Development Bank, Lee Dong-wol, suggests that Asiana Airlines affiliates, including Busan Air, will be included in the sale, and that Kumho Asiana's main creditors will come up with a detailed financing plan before April 25th. As any plans to take over the heavily indebted airline are still in their infancy, it will take at least 6 months before we know which group will be Asiana Airlines' new owner. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Turning to the local markets now, and South Korea's benchmark KOSPI rose for the 13th consecutive session today, the longest ever winning streak. Analysts point to more foreigners buying Korean shares. Our Ko Ryun-hee explains.
In Tuesday's session, Korea's benchmark KOSPI closed at around 2249, up 0.26%. This marks the highest close in more than 6 months. It was the 13th session of gains in a row for the KOSPI, tying a record set back in 1984. As for why, analysts point to more investment by foreigners. They bought around $135.5 million worth of shares on Tuesday, for a total during this streak of gains worth around 2.2 billion. Market watchers say foreign investors were upbeat for several reasons.
The U.S.-China trade tensions are easing. Also, global economic indicators are showing signs of a rebound. And most importantly, we should look at monetary policy. Countries, including the U.S., are holding their interest rates steady. This is having a positive impact on the stock market.
Others point out, though, that this is not necessarily good for the market overall.
This buying is concentrated in certain companies like Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and Samsung Electromechanics, so the consecutive rises don't mean that the overall stock market is improving.
Meanwhile, Korea's tech-heavy junior index, the KOSPI, closed at around 765, down 0.23%. The Korean currency closed at around 1,136 won against the US dollar, up more than 2 won from the previous close. 고르니, Arirang News.
President Moon has asked Parliament to move ahead with 2 new justice nominees for the Constitutional Court after lawmakers failed to adopt reports on their confirmation hearings by Monday's deadline. According to the Blue House, the president has asked that the reports for Lee Mi-sun and Hyung-bae be approved by Thursday. Opposition parties have protested Lee's appointment because of her husband's activities on the stock market, which she denies being involved in. President Moon can still appoint the nominees even if the reports are not approved and is likely to do so by Friday as their predecessors' terms end Thursday. During his swearing-in ceremony Tuesday, Korea's new Army Chief of Staff General Seo-ho pledged to ensure combat readiness and said building trust between the militaries of the 2 Koreas is key in facilitating everlasting peace on the peninsula. Seo also vowed to foster specialized manpower in the ROK-U.S. Combined Forces to better prepare for the transfer of wartime operational control while calling for reform measures to create stronger and smarter forces. Earlier in the day, the new Air Force Chief of Staff, General Won In-chul, also called for strengthened combat readiness, stressing improved operational capability as the Air Force implements cutting-edge weapons and technology. Former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is heading Korea's new national organization to fight fine dust, says it's important to work with China to solve the pollution problem. At a seminar Tuesday, Ban Ki-moon said he will form an advisory panel composed of around 500 experts under the new organization and work with countries in Northeast Asia to do scientific research and find ways to reduce fine dust. The Minister of Environment, Cho Yang-ho, added that companies should also join in to develop new technologies to help. The K-pop phenomenon is gaining more and more popularity in North America. BTS have another hit album and will perform at a top music award show. And other K-pop groups are also getting in on the act. Our Seo Bo-bin has the story.
BTS has reached #1 on the Billboard 200 once again, reaching another milestone in K-pop history. According to the official Billboard website on Monday, the boy band's new album Map of the Soul Persona, released last Friday, has already hit the top of Billboard's main album chart. This is the 3rd time a BTS album has scored a Billboard #1 after their last albums Love Yourself Tear and Love Yourself Answer achieved the same feat. BTS also looks set to reach #1 on the UK official chart in what would be a first for a South Korean artist. BTS will be participating at the 2019 Billboard Music Awards next month, collaborating with US singer Halsey. This is the 2nd year in a row that BTS will be performing at the Billboard Music Awards. The group has also been nominated in the Top Duo Group category and as well as in the Top Social Artist category. And it's not just BTS in the K-pop spotlight. Other K-pop stars such as Blackpink and NCT 127 are on the rise as well. Last Friday, K-pop girl group Blackpink made history by being the first South Korean artist to perform at the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival. They will also appear on Stephen Colbert's CBS talk show on Thursday local time. And on the same day, another boy band group NCT 127 will appear on ABC's Good Morning America
ahead of their tour of 11 North American cities, which kicks off on April 24th. 서보빈, Arirang News.
The body of late Hanjin Group chairman Cho Yang-ho has been laid to rest after a 5-day funeral service. A hearse carrying Cho's body left Seoul's Yonsei Severance Hospital earlier today and took a detour around Korean Air's headquarters before making its way to the family's cemetery in Yongin, Gyeonggi-do Province. Cho, who turned Korean Air into a global operator, died last week at the age of 70 from chronic lung disease. The average amount of cash Koreans carry with them is falling rapidly. The Bank of Korea did a survey last year on 1,100 heads of household, and over 98% of them said they carry cash. But the average amount carried was around $69, down 33% from 2015. The BOK attributed the decline to the rising use of mobile payment services. A new law that allows police to monitor juvenile sex offenders around the clock is now in effect. Ex-convicts deemed likely to re-offend will be under 24/7 police observation for at least 6 months. The law was prompted by the Cho Do-sun case in 2008 when Cho brutally raped a then 8-year-old girl. Starting Wednesday, Korean citizens will be able to report illegal parking through a mobile app. They just need to upload 2 photos of the illegally parked car via the Safety Ministry's app, after which the driver will be fined up to roughly $70. Violations include leaving cars parked within 5 meters of a fire hydrant or crossroad, within 10 meters of a bus station or near a crosswalk. That has been your 3-minute newsflash. It is that time in the newscast to take a look at some of the digital media content available on Arirang's website and social media platforms.
And today we have another episode of News where our Seon-kyung takes a closer look at the top trending social stories.
Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Eun-kyung, news reporter at Arirang TV. Here are today's News. Five years have passed since the passenger ferry Sewol sank, taking hundreds of lives, with most of them being students. The painful reminder has completely changed Korea's perception of safety, prompting the government to strengthen safety measures. The Ministry of Education has introduced the new education programs on safety. In addition, ferry operators and the safety of vessels have come under much tighter government scrutiny. Prior to the disaster, safety inspection had been conducted by the Korea Shipping Association. That came under intense criticism in the aftermath of the disaster, as the association doubles as a lobby group for maritime firms. It is still heartbreaking to think back on what happened on the day, but it is encouraging to see efforts are being made to ensure that similar tragedy will never strike again. May they all rest in peace. If you happen to see something abnormal flying in a peculiar way, would you think it is a UFO? Well, this person thinks so, a Korean man named Lucas Kim. He was on a plane when he spotted what he thought another aircraft outside his window. Thinking it was strange and rare to have another flight just right next to his, Mr. Kim took out his phone and recorded the stunning moment. In the footage, the mystery sighting appeared to be a single aircraft far off in the distance. However, as he zoomed in, he realized that he had been looking at 6 different objects. Moments later, they split into pairs and soon disappeared from the view. Alien saucers were a top-secret military project. What do you think? Imagine bitten by a dog as you're leaving the house or walking down the street. It would be a terrifying experience, wouldn't it? The number of incidents involving dog bites has been soaring in Korea recently. Statistics show over 6,000 people in the past 3 years have received hospital treatments for injuries caused by violent pets. To address this concern, the government has adopted a new regulation. It requires owners of 5 dangerous dog breeds to keep a muzzle on their pet at all times as heading outdoors. However, with the growing number of biting incidents, some citizens are arguing that all large dogs should be required to wear a muzzle. Responding to this, animal rights groups are protesting the decision, saying muzzling is a form of abuse. They also say it is unfair to blame and victimize dogs when the problem usually lies in negligent pet owners. What is your opinion on this? That's all for today, and we have another Unni coming in on Friday, so don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you next week. Bye bye! Temperatures in Seoul hit their highest reading so far this season.
That's right. The highs in the southern regions also peaked above 25 degrees Celsius, feeling more like early summer than spring. For more, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle, what's the latest?
Good evening, guys. The weather has been very favorable today, but unfortunately, that also means that conditions are still extremely dry. Now, dry weather advisories are concentrated in the central region, while east of Gangwon province is under a more serious weather warning. So please be careful of fire hazards as gusty wind is expected to blow across Gangwon province. Unlike today's clear blue skies, the nation will be blanketed by thick clouds tomorrow. Meanwhile, Beijing will be mainly sunny with temperatures in Beijing rising into the 30s. Tonight's rain on Jeju is expected to last until Wednesday, but even under a blanket of clouds, the daily lows won't drop below the teens for most parts of the peninsula. Daily highs are expected to be 2 to 5 degrees above seasonal average, so will climb up to 21 degrees Celsius. The weather will stay pleasant and dry for most parts during this rest of the week. However, Jeju may see more showers by Sunday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
사진 앞에서 울지 마요. 나는 그곳에 없어요. 나는 잠들어 있지 않아요. 제발 날 위해 울지 말아요. 나는 천 개의 바람이 되었죠.
Well, that wraps it up for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
News in Depth is coming up shortly, and we'll discuss more on the tragic Sewol-ho disaster with an expert, so stay tuned.